Welcome back to the B139. I'm Shells.
I'm Don Vito. How y'all feeling? Welcome back. We're here with our second guest for the evening. We would like to welcome her here. She's a Harlem native, co-founder, Violent Voices United Incorporated. Silent Voices, excuse me. United Incorporated, community activist, freelance writer, creator of Got Tested peer-to-peer campaign, author, recipient of New York Yankees State Farm Go to Bat Award, Tiffany Simone. How you doing, Tiffany? You got a lot going on. Man, how do you balance all of this stuff? That's why I kept stopping like, man, you working.
How I balance it?
Yeah.
I like to keep active, especially when it comes to the community. Community is really important to me, and a lot of things that I've done, even my writing, is about community. You know, when I write, it's usually about things that are happening in people's lives or things that I've seen, and what I want to do in my writing, like in my community, is make it better. So when people read something I wrote, I want to be able to educate people and just change a life. Even if I touch one,
Right.
I touch one.
Where did you get that niche from? Where did you get that bug to want to do so much in the community?
Well, I was a victim of child sexual abuse, and that's how For the Petals came about. And then I know that there's a lot of women, even when I was doing interviews, when I started coming out, or not even coming out, but coming out of not in closet, but not hiding that this has happened to me. It's probably happened to a lot of people. Let's talk about it. And talking about it with people, I see that other people have been affected, not just women, but girls too. And a lot of what I feel, I just put in writing, whether it's poems or anything else. And then the other thing is with Silent Voices, I came up with that because it's children without a voice. So I said, okay, I'm doing all these things for the community, let me incorporate myself, let me become a not-for-profit. Somebody said, Tiffany, you get a lot more money, a lot more funding by becoming a not-for-profit because you're always doing something for the community. And then I became a 501c3. And then there was just no stopping. I just felt like I need to help young people get a future.
So you have a extensive background. You have a BA in communication, film, video from the City College of New York. And nowadays people are bypassing getting a degree.
Well, it made me go back to school. When John Singleton started doing Boys in the Hood and Spike Lee, when I started seeing all these films and stories about young black men, I said, well, what about young black women in the inner city? What about our stories? So I started writing, and I have an uncle who's, he wrote for Sports Illustrated. He's in California now, writing movie scripts and so forth. I had talked to him, and I wrote something up, and then I showed it to him. And I'm thinking that both of us was going to write this movie script together. I had this this big idea. I'm going to Hollywood. I'm writing movies with me and my uncle because he's in California and so forth. And I remember we went to the Writers Guild on 57th Street, and we came down the steps. I said, "Let me go and write the movie script." And he looked at me and said, "You don't really have too much writing experience." And I was like, "I thought we were gonna do this together." And that's what made me go back to school, because I said I refuse for anybody to tell me what I can't do. And I learned how to write what it is to write a movie script.
So you received the City College Civil City Project Award, first prize for your poem titled The Melting Pot. How was that experience?
Great. And again, that had to do with me just really going back to school and exploring everything I had inside me, this gift, my creative side, and that's writing. That's film. And The Melting Pot, again, it's about just people of all colors just coming together. And New York City, that's what we are.
You wrote that, huh? Can you recite that for us real quick?
I would have to look it up. I would have to look it up. I would have to look it up.
So how long have you been a community activist?
I'm gonna say really since high school. I was doing Halloween events for the people in the children in the community, Christmas events, giving away toys, finding ways to raise money to get toys, reaching out to all these different radio stations, getting them to come out and support what something I always wanted to do. You know, when I look at a child, when I think about my childhood, like my mother gave me everything. We wasn't on welfare. I went to boarding school and private school. What we didn't do was really sit down and talk. She gave me anything I wanted in the world. Put me, like I said, in boarding school, which cost a lot of money, but we didn't sit down and have a conversation. So even when that incident happened to me at 10 years old, 9 years old, if we had a relationship, I should have been able to come out and talk to her. You know, like, Mom, this is what happened to me. And that's what happens with a lot of young people. They feel like, because when we grow up, we're taught to, we're a child, stay in your place. If something happens, young people tend not to be believed if something happens to them. You know, or if you do tell an adult, they're like, you know, you're just talking, or that didn't really happen. So like I said, throughout my life, it was always about just helping young people have a voice, period.
See, like on the B139, we all about stories and teaching and spreading the word and the message and stuff like that. Would you like to say what happened, or could you keep saying something happened? But
no, like this is like Fallen Petals, which this is the first book that's actually coming out. And this is kind of my life, fiction and nonfiction mixed up together. The doctor worked for Sydenham Hospital, used to be on 125th Street. My mother at that time was also an employee there. Of course, they became very close. He became like family. I would call him my godfather, and he would come over and he would take me and my friends horseback riding and take us different places. And I don't know what happened or how it became about, but he wanted to take me away with him for the weekend. And my mother, you know, she didn't think anything of it. Like, you know, what's the big deal? We worked together. It seems like to be a great guy. And he also did the surgery on both of my feet. So we had developed a very close relationship. Besides my doctor, like I said, he was like a godfather to me. And I remember him taking me, we got in his Mercedes, a brown Mercedes, and we were riding. And I remember us just riding. It was very dark. And I remember him pulling over to the side. He said, well, Tiffany, you know, he said, let's freshen up. Like, we had a long way to go. And at 9 or 10, we were like, okay. And I remember when he pulled over, wherever he pulled over, I was in the car, and I remember seeing a drive-in movie theater. I think it might have been a Disney movie playing or something. And then he came back, and he said, well, come on, let's go freshen up. And I remember, I guess the hotels back then was like row houses. So you didn't have to go up to the front of the hotel. I guess you get the key, and then you go into the room. And I remember going into the room, and I remember sitting on the bed, and there was a mirror, and then, you know, the hotel. And he was like, well, you want to freshen up? And I'm like, sure. And I remember going into the shower to freshen up, the glass sliding doors, and I was freshening up, and I remember bathing, and then I remember the steam was coming down, it was very hot. And I remember the glass sliding doors open and him coming in, and he didn't have any clothes on. And I'm looking at 10, I'm like this was weird. It was weird. I know what was happening wasn't right. And I remember him, you know, touch me, or like wash, like he was just washing me, like it was supposed to be normal. And then I remember, like, at one point I'm like, I want to get out now. I didn't yell, I didn't scream, but I was very assertive. Like, I want to get out now, because I knew what was happening. It shouldn't be happening. And at one point he said, well, you know, I'm just washing. Like, everything was good. I said, no, I want to get out, and I want to get out now. And I remember, I guess from his tone, he was like, calm down, because I guess he saw that I was getting to a level that I guess he didn't want me screaming, and he wanted me to keep thinking that everything was normal. And I remember the glass sliding door got stuck. And then at that point, that's when I started panicking. Because the steam was coming down, and at that point, I was like, I couldn't breathe. And he was like, calm down. But the only thing I remember was that glass door getting stuck. Finally, he opened it up. And I remember getting out and getting on the bed, and I remember looking to this mirror that was in front of me. And I remember like drying off and almost scrubbing my body, because you feel dirty, but I don't remember the weekend. But I do remember I came back home, but I don't remember the whole weekend. because that whole part is like blocked out. And I remember remember those gates, the swinging chains that used to be in front of the apartment building. I was swinging on a chain with my two best friends. And I told them what happened to me with Zoe and Denise. And that was the last time I spoke about it, because then I didn't want to be their friends anymore. Because I felt different. At 9, 10 years old, I felt different, and I didn't want them to be, I didn't want to be their friends anymore. And then the next time I spoke about it, I probably was about 18, 17 years old.
So last week we had Robert Holmes on the show. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He also had an experience with that. He wrote a book and talked about it. And one of the things he said was he struggled with his identity because of it. You know, being that he's also a man, and then, you know, even at his side, the fact that, you know, sometimes he felt like, did he bring that upon himself, and it changed his image of himself, and he made him angry. Did it affect you in any type of way?
I think as far as relationships, and that's the reason for me wanting to write or being so attracted to kids, because I felt the need to protect them, because I felt like I can identify, if I see a child acting a certain way, maybe shy or distant, I can identify. So it affected me as far as relationships. I was very protective when it came to children. I was never promiscuous, because I didn't really like to be touched. So I was a woman that wasn't in a lot of relationships, and I think it was hard to be able to open up to guys, because you didn't want them to think that something was wrong with you or you were weird. And then I finally, after all these years, my husband, who's there right now, I finally found somebody that really understood who I am.
Yes.
And I'm able to be myself and be free.
Right.
Like I said, like talking to y'all about this right now, is allowing me to be free to be able to talk about it. Like, it's okay. You know,
It's part of the healing process.
It's part of the healing process, and if I can talk about it, and if I can tell my story, whether it's in a book, then it'll allow, and if it's a well-written book, then allow people to be able to come out and talk about it too. Yeah.
All right, so we'll move along with this conversation. So you worked as an activist with domestic violence, rape, child abuse, HIV, and AIDS. So what led you to focus on these causes, HIV and AIDS specifically?
HIV and AIDS. My cousin Lalita died of AIDS, and I started getting more involved, because when I became a 501c3, and when my cousin died of AIDS, I started doing research. One thing, when I'm passionate about something, I can't stop. Even if I don't know about it, I'm going to educate myself, and I'm going to learn about whatever it is that I want to put my hands on, whatever I want to learn. And when my cousin died from AIDS, I started doing my research. In the course of doing my research, when I started my HIV outreach, it might have been the early 90s. And I started finding out that there were a lot of young people infected or affected by HIV and AIDS. You know, they're being promiscuous, they're having sex, they're not putting on condoms. So my son, who helped me out with the campaign as well, I said, I need your help. I need you to show me how to be able to reach out to these young people. And he said, the music. So a lot of his friends was into the music scene. They like dancing, they're rapping. So then I incorporated HIV and music. And when I started doing the outreach, I started getting a lot of young people to get involved. And how I started getting them involved is a lot of young people in Highbridge, because that's also where I lived, in Highbridge. And like I said, I was always doing outreach, so it was easy to kind of pull them in, because the kids like to talk to me. So what I started doing in my house is I started inviting my son's friends, started coming up, and I would educate them right there in my home. So I would put up like a little screen on my wall, a little white screen. I would pull it up, and I had videos that talked about HIV and AIDS. So they were like short films on HIV and what would happen with young people getting infected and having sex. And then we came up with the campaign, Got Tested. So what I started doing is, if you got tested, then you got this HIV, you got this shirt that said Got Tested. So the young people got involved. I had them out there educating, and it was a cool thing to do. We would do these events where music and young people, and we brought them in, and I got in contact with a lot of HIV organizations and got them to come out to do my testing. And next thing you know, the campaign became really big. We was on BET, 106 in Park. We became the face at one point of 106 in Park. If you look at some of the old episodes, you had all these kids in the audience with these HIV, it said got tested, these black shirts that got tested. And it was a cool thing to do. We were at the Rucker basketball game. We were throughout the city with this campaign, throughout the city, getting young people involved.
How was it a challenge? Because young kids, you sit them down and you want to show them a documentary or a short film.
Let me tell you something
like that.
The way I was doing it, and how I was able to relate to young people, it was, if I can show you the pictures online and you can see all the young people that was involved. We were in the African American Day Parade. I had 200 young people deep, marching with their shirts throughout the city. Monica Sweeney, Department of Health, I tested, when I sat with her and I did this citywide campaign, I tested over 3,000 and something young people throughout the city. And the health department can tell you that. I don't know how we did it, but we did it. My goal was to test 8,000 in 8 months. That didn't happen, but we tested 3,000 in a year.
Yeah, I just read something that's like real interesting too. It says, research statistics on New York City and Harlem, they were surprised by some of the results. In New York City, almost 3/4 of the new HIV diagnoses are among men who have sex with men. Black men are disproportionately affected by HIV among males ages 13 to 59. The diagnosis rate among black males was 1.6 times higher than among Latino males and more than 3 times higher among white males. Also in 2017, Chelsea, Clinton, and Central Harlem, Morningside Heights had the highest HIV diagnosis rates.
Wow, still.
Yeah.
And that's scary, even more so now, because everybody feel like everybody is. I don't know how to even explain that, but with all the education that is out there, and at one point it seemed like to get tested. And the campaigns they were having, everything seems like it's a fad. Because remember, at one time you had all the HIV campaigns and you had everything they were promoting on the train station and the bus stop. They're not doing it anymore. It's like everything is swept under the rug because now something else is taken.
It's not big like it used to be. So people forgot.
It's like,
or they're not paying attention.
It's like people forgot, but then they're coming out with all these different type of medications that if you take this pill, is it called PrEP?
PrEP.
Yeah, I just heard about it. It came out like you can have sex now. It won't get affected.
And when you, like I said, I understand what they're trying to do, but for me, I don't think that's a good idea because basically what you're saying, it's all right to have free sex because we got this pill that possibly cure you.
They make it seem as if it's not as important as it was years ago. With HIV, you can still catch it. You can still catch it with the pill, and it's still as dangerous as it was.
Exactly, and people need to understand that.
All right, so let's go into this book, right? So you got quite a few books. You got Fallen Petals, and there we go, Fallen Petals. There we go.
And actually, in Fallen Petals, and everybody says both. The book should be out by this week. Right. I actually put the guy's picture in the book.
Oh, it's a guy.
That is the guy.
Okay.
So what happened to him?
I don't know. It's so funny. When I got back into college and I started educating myself a little more, just doing a lot of research, even about child abuse, I tried to find this guy because they had something called the statute of limitations. About Megan's Law. And at that time, I started doing my research, and I wanted to be able to get justice for this. What this doctor did to me, my statute of limitations ran out.
Was it 15 years, right?
No, I think up to 34. I don't know how many years, but I think when I became 34, over 34, something like that, at that time, my statute of limitations had ran out. But I said to myself, okay, since my statute of limitations ran out, let me find another way to get justice. And that's when I wrote I've been working on this for actually 10 years until I got it right, and I said, let me write Fallen Petals.
So let's talk about, so we got an interesting book here. I don't know if you know about this right here, bro. But the Harlem Plug, right? It's the Richard Fritz Simmons story. The rise and fall of New York City's cocaine consignment kingpin. So what made you write this book?
His sister, Sheila Harrison, that's my best friend. And I also had a farmer's market, and Sheila was working over there with me. We were partners in my farmer's market, and she kept telling me this story about her brother, Tiffany, I want you to write my story. So you write my story. I said, okay, Sheila, when I got time. So when the farmer's market closed down, I said, well, Sheila, I got some time, let me write your book. And she sat down. I still didn't know who Fritz was.
Right.
Okay, I didn't know who Fritz was, because even though I dealt with a lot of guys from the street, or I dated guys from the street, I never was of the street. And so I didn't know who Fritz was. So when she started telling me her story, it was fascinating me. I'm like, wow. Because what her family endured before Fritz passed, and then after Fritz passed, all the hurt, all the pain, all the betrayal. Even when we went and decided we were going to write the story and we had to interview people, some people didn't even want to be interviewed. Oh, let him just lie in peace. Let him just lie in peace. I said, lie in peace? Lie in peace? Is the family lying in peace? People ran off with money, and people felt like, oh, this is the streets. He should have took care of his family. But he did take care of his family. He didn't have his family involved in his business, but he left it up to people he trusted, with the money that he left behind to take care of his family and do the right thing. And the people that could have possibly did the right thing by his family, Chuck, which was sort of his enforcer, and then you had Ace, which was his right-hand man, right hand and left hand. In 91, I call it a conspiracy. It's kind of weird how everything happened. In 91, Fritz started getting very ill. And while he was getting very ill, he started getting sick. I think it was in May, it might have been May or March, Ace had wound up getting busted. And Ace wound up doing 20-something years for a murder he didn't even do. He's out, he's out now. He got out maybe about 3-4 years ago, and they deported him. And to this day, he declares his innocence. But when Ace wound up going to jail for a murder he didn't do, 2-3 months later, Chuck gets killed. And then 3 months after that, Fritz dies. So like that whole time period, or that whole, what everybody call, he was Harlem at that time, and everything he did, is like everything died behind him. But like I said, I call it conspiracy because it's just so weird how everything happens. It's almost like I talk about in the book, like, was this some kind of setup? Did somebody set up? Did somebody want to see Fritz gone? Did someone want to see Ace in jail? Did someone want to see Chuck dead? Like that whole, it wasn't even a crew, but it was somebody that basically took care of Harlem and supplied all of Harlem. And then that whole era ended. People talk about the Rich Porter and Alpo and the AZ, but Fritz was Harlem. And it seemed like in 91 when Fritz died, everything died behind him. He was a legacy, but what people don't know is his story.
Right.
Who is Fritz?
Right.
Fritz was like a mystery man that nobody knew. Nas talked about him, in a rap song. The first information that anybody found out about Fritz is when I started talking about him, on my YouTube page, when I started interviewing people, trying to not just understand the man, but understand everything behind the man, like who he was. And when I wrote the Harlem Plug with his sister and all the interviews, number one, it was like putting a puzzle together. Because we're talking about trying to understand somebody that's been going now over 25 years. He's not here to tell his story. So what I wound up doing is going out to Barbados and interviewing Ace because I needed to know about this man. And Ace, who actually rode with Fritz, would be able to tell me a lot about this man because he was like right there sitting, eating, living with the guy. Like he would be able to tell me a lot about this man. Then I went and found Chuck, the enforcer. Chuck is gone. But I said, well, let me talk to his son. But then even better, the woman he was with at the time, I researched and I found her living in Jersey. And I was even able to get a little more insight to who his enforcer was. So I said, okay. And then some of the family members I was able to interview. But like I said, during the course of interviewing, it was just a lot going on, people that didn't want to be interviewed. And I was cool with that, you know, or people felt like Sheila, his sister, couldn't write his story because she really wasn't a part of his business. And I found out peculiar, but that's his family. You know what I'm saying? How could his family not be able to tell his story? And then my other thought is, well, you know what? I don't want people to think that the Harlem Plug is about drugs and killing, but about Harlem and the effect that drugs had on this family, or the effect that, even goes deeper than that. Fritz's father was killed by the police in 1968. And when someone told me that Fritz's father Sheila said my father had gotten killed. I said, well, how did he get killed? And she said, I don't know, it's just a whole lot of rumors, nobody knew. I said, if he got killed in 68 by police, it got to be some kind of news clipping on this. We talk about somebody being killed by police in 68. So when I started doing my research, I found out that, and started talking more to Sheila about their father. This is about a father. Fritz and Sheila have the same father, but different mothers. But the father did everything in his power to keep this family together. Regardless if they were about different women, he made sure that his children knew who their sibling was. It wasn't my step brother or my stepsister. This is your sister and this is your brother. And that's how he raised his kids. And it was unfortunate that when the father got killed, that's when the family went like this. Fritz went back to South Carolina and Sheila with her mother, and they eventually wound up coming back into Harlem together on 112th Street and wound up all living in the same building. But the tragedy is the father being killed, and then the kid's story begins. You know, and so what I want people to know about this book is a lot of people think it's going to be about drugs and about killing. Yeah, we're going to talk about that because that was part of Fritz's life, but I want you to understand this man from a child, who this man was and why he became who he was. Because when people talk about Fritz, one thing when people talk about Fritz was never about dressing all fancy. That's not who he was. Fritz, because his father taught him what it is to take care of family and to keep family close, besides Fritz's family being his family, anybody outside was also family. You know, when he was doing what he was doing and giving away these drugs, you know, people thought that was insane. Like, how you giving away drugs to people you don't even know? Not that he didn't know them. If he knew somebody that knew him, he was able to get that. But he gave away these drugs because he wanted people to be able to live. He gave the drugs. No, drugs, we're not condoning drugs. That's not what we're doing. But if you go back and you talk about the history of why people started selling drugs or why people even started gambling, and numbers. Like all that I talk about in the book, even the numbers games. When you're talking about St. Clair and all these people, you know, with the numbers game, they were doing these numbers and what they were doing with their money is they were putting it back into Harlem. And that's what people need to understand. Fritz wasn't condoning people selling drugs. He did what he did, but he was trying to help people to be able to help themselves. You know, get out the hood, save the money. These are the things that he talked about with people. And if you look at the interviews on my YouTube page, the guys that I've interviewed, they tell you that Fritz was telling, save your money, invest in your community. And that's what Fritz did. You know, unfortunately, he died young, and a lot of things that he wanted to do as far as real estate and all these other things he wanted to do, he did some of them, but not to the extent that he wanted to. And I think even with the money that he left behind, he was hoping that the people that he trusted with his business as well as money, that they would have did the right thing. And they did.
But that's how it goes with our people. They want to tell us what we can do and what we should do and how we can make ourselves better, but we weren't provided the means. So when somebody does that, they want to tell us it's wrong.
Yeah.
But you wasn't giving us the means to change our path and make our lives better in the first place. So how can you knock this man down and all he's doing is provide his people with this type of sword?
It's not right, and I'm not condoning drugs, saying it's right, but this man, he had a plan. He had a plan, and the plan was to take care of his family and take care of his community. You know, there was a lot of guys, even some of these buildings that we have up in Harlem, some of these buildings are up in Harlem because of Fritz. You know, I've been talking about a real estate guy that bought a lot of property. He was able to do that because he came to Fritz for the money to be able to afford these buildings that he was building in Harlem. You know, when people talk about gentrification, we gave Harlem away. We gave Harlem away. And that's something I talk about in Harlem Plug, like black folks wasn't here first. It was the Indians, and then you had the Irish came, and you had the Dutch came, you had the English came, and then you had I talk about this man in the book. He was a black guy in 1921, real estate mogul, black guy who, once I guess we had the crash came and everything, and then the white folks who were living up in Harlem was really supposed to be like the Hamptons for white folks. Yeah. That's what it really was supposed to be. And then when they had the crash and they needed to be able to sell this property, it was this black guy, this educated black guy that was into real estate. They reached out to this guy, could you help us sell this property? And then that's when black folks started moving in, and the black guy got really smart. And he's like, you know what? You trying to keep black folks out, but I'm going to make it where I'm going to buy up this property, and white folks can't rent it from us. So then what wound up happening is that's how blacks started getting up. That's how blacks started getting up in Harlem. And like right now, everything is just, when I talk about the book and when I talk about Harlem Plug, I try to educate people, let them know that we had this, you know, with all the drugs that being sold and all the number running that we were doing, we had this. We had control over this, and we let it go.
Yeah, wrong dream. A lot of people living the wrong dream when they had the money. You know?
Yeah, exactly.
But I'm gonna say something real quick before we wrap it up.
Not trying to throw everybody off, but it's just like this book is more than just about drugs and shooting and violence. It's bigger than that, and I need people to understand that.
We had quite a few people come on the show and, you know, talk their stories and stuff like that, and you know, with different books and stuff like that. But you kind of won me with the way that the things that you spoke about, because you actually traveled and you did research and you had interviews with people before you wrote, to put that information in the book. We had a lot of people come on the show, and they just based off of what they heard or some of the things somebody told them. You went to go see these people and get the actual story. It don't get too much realer than that.
Make sure everything was right.
Exactly. You travel. You understand the difference? Like, you know, Because I know, we had some people talk a little about Fritz and, and the people and other dudes in the streets but she went to go see people that was associated with him and knew him for real, and got their story like, what? Not what she heard, And that's why, I want y'all to go get that Harlem Plug book, because this thing, I thought I was watching a movie for me. I'm like, damn, tell me more, you know what I'm saying?
No, but
I'm really feeling it, and that's good though, man.
But I need people to understand too that this book is the real deal. Yes, and I make sure what I did when I did my research, my articles, even court documents, that's all gonna be in the back of my book. So you can't say that this book is, excuse my French, but you can't say this book is bullshit. This is all real. Because all my research is going to be right in the back of that.
Ain't no bullshit over here.
None at all.
Harlem Plug.
None at all.
Oh, man. Tiffany Simone. Simone, excuse me. Listen, tell everybody where they can find you at.
You can find me on Tiffany Simone, the writer, Instagram, Tiffany Simone, the writer, Tiffany Simone, the writer. I'm on Instagram, Tiffany Simone, the writer, the YouTube page. Tiffany Simone, the writer, on Facebook. I'm everywhere. Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, SoundCloud. We also have music that we're coming out with. And the Harlem Plug is dropping Harlem Week. 17th and the 18th. We're going to be out there on 135th Street, Harlem Week. Fallen Petals. It'll be out this month, so you can pick that up. But I just want people to know, pick up Fallen Petals. It's a good book. Don't just pick up the Harlem Plug because it's about Fritz and it's about Harlem. I'm a writer at the end of the day.
That's
I write. And I'm a hell of a writer.
There it is. Hey, Tiff, tell them what podcast show you on right quick before we go.
The Beat 139.
There we go. Cool. Thank you for coming to the show.
Thank you.
Cool. Turn it on.